And here's what's crazy. I was ketogenic anyways. So it was bacon and eggs for breakfast. It was steak or salmon for dinner, but then it was a big healthy salad for lunch. It was like a Mark Sisson, it was a big salad with bacon and avocado and olive oil and things like that. And then just one day I was too lazy to go get my salad. And the next morning my gums didn't bleed when I flossed, and it hadn't been like that in ages. So I didn't have a salad the next day, and I felt hair on top of my head, and my tinnitus, my ears weren't ringing. And the difference between me and optimal health was a salad. And it sounds crazy to anybody that would be listening, but ketogenic diet improved my body composition, or the ease with which I maintain my body composition, and it improved my energy levels. But I did not recover my health until I went carnivore. And the only difference between me ketogenic and me carnivore was a big salad for lunch.
Yeah, and I continue to hear that same story. People say, well, it's, carnivore only works because you're cutting out processed foods and, so on and so forth. But I'm like, well, I often hear people that already did that. They cut out all the garbage, and all they're doing is removing mostly some vegetables from their diet, and they get better, which is, I think there's something there. It's remarkable. Maybe that's not applicable to everybody, but certainly there's enough people where that occurs that there's something going on here. And, we can talk about, is there some level of toxicity in certain plants that some people are sensitive to? Apparently it seems to be. Now, what does your diet look like today? Now you're how far out? You're about 6 months removed from this Guillain-Barré diagnosis. You haven't changed anything dietary wise, did you? I mean, or where are you at now?
For me, if I eat breakfast, it's bacon and eggs, hamburger meat, steak now and then. We try to go to the Brazilian steakhouse once or twice a month. I got my wife and daughters. We are all basically on the diet. I'm looser with the daughters. They're 4 and 2, and so we give them a lot of raw dairy, things like that. Let them have a little bit of honey on occasion, because they're not sick. They're not starting off,
Right, sure.
metabolically broken.
Right.
But that's kind of where we're at. It's salmon a couple of times a week. I try to make sure that everybody's getting the vitamin D and the calcium that they need. We're adamant about, getting out in the sun and things like that. But it's mostly eggs, meat, steak, a little bit of fish here and there. My wife, we probably go through about a gallon of raw milk every 2 days between my daughters and my wife. I don't do a lot of that. I did open up the aperture. I'd be interested to hear your take on this. I opened up the aperture a little bit afterwards, as I left the hospital, to put weight on. What I've noticed with my daughters, they go through phases where they eat a lot and they plump up, and then they lengthen and they don't eat a lot. So every 2 to 4 months, they plump up and then they lengthen, and they plump up and they lengthen. And I'm convinced at this point that, the growth, when you look at the requirements of brain development, when you look at the requirements of your immune system and the importance of cholesterol and fat and things like that, saturated fat, animal fats in particular, I used to think of food as going directly into the raw material of the body. What I think I've seen, and kind of how I've started to live my life, the food goes into the body, and then the body takes from the body to build, right? So you've probably seen a few of the things that they attribute to long old age, right? Elderly tend to have higher LDL. It's one of the few things they have in common. So it looks protective. They talk about the bell curve, where high LDL at 30, 40, and 50 is bad for you, but at 60, 70, 80, the only thing they have in common is high LDL, right? Cholesterol, LDL, things like that. What I've tried to do is put on a little bit of fluff, right? If you will, call it fluff, I guess, so that my body could use that to regenerate the nerves, right? Because the GBS is essentially the degeneration of the myelin sheath. So I had to rebuild the myelin, and I have to rebuild my cirral nerve because they took 2 inches out of it. And I've allowed myself to put on a little bit of weight because of that, based on my understanding, or at least my observation, that the body builds from itself, and I need a little bit extra to do that. So I have done a little bit more dairy. I've done a little bit of honey just to give myself something, my body to something to work with. I can walk around. I walk around at 178. I fought MMA at 155. I have veins popping out everywhere. You can't see any body fat. And I'm not convinced that that's necessarily the healthiest, most sustainable way to live. And certainly as I'm trying to recover from this, I probably need a little extra. So I've opened up the aperture on my diet a little bit, but not much. 99.9% is red meat and eggs.
Yeah, just a couple comments there. So if we look at healthy older people, some of the things they do have in common, yes, you pointed out that many of them do have relatively high LDLs. And some of the thoughts are that, low LDLs associated with disease at that age, cancer, heart disease, so on and so forth. The other thing they tend to be is still very insulin sensitive. So we see people that are insulin sensitive, and they also tend to retain a little bit more lean mass. And so they tend to be a little bit stronger. And so I think those things are all consistent with age from an actual measurement standpoint. What gets you there, how you get there, people can argue about the difference, but being insulin sensitive, retaining lean mass, and then arguably having higher LDL may be protective for and related with longer life. As far as you'd mentioned about, is it healthy long term to walk around shredded at 7% body fat? I don't think there's any studies that would support being that lean provides you any additional benefit beyond a certain point. I mean, there's obesity, which is clearly unhealthy, and then there's sort of normal body weight, and probably people at normal body weight do just as well as somebody that might be leaner. And so there's I think the leanness may confer, like if you're in a weight category sport, obviously when you're fighting in a weight class, being leaner is going to be more helpful. But I mean, just for normal day to day, living, being that lean is probably not going to provide any advantage. You may like the way you look better and that type of stuff, and that's fine too. And the other thing is about, like you said, when you're building yourself up, yeah, I mean, it's often not uncommon to put on a little bit of body fat. I mean, you're in this caloric, surplus situation in order to build lean mass. That's how, it's very difficult to stay super lean and then put on structure, muscle, whatever it is. It sort of can be done, but it's extremely difficult. Some people, utilize